Well, it's been a long time coming, but the day has finally come that Mario Kart 8 is officially set to die, which will most likely be sometime later this year. It really is crazy to think that we've been playing the same Mario Kart game for over 10 years now, especially considering that we got the previous 5 games in that same time frame. But with this having been the Mario Kart game for over a decade, the inevitable conversation of what's coming back has only continued to be delayed. Back in the day, this conversation used to be fairly frequent, as we usually got a new Mario Kart game every 2 to 3 years, and although it was always sad to say goodbye to all the new tracks from a given title, given how frequent of an occurrence this was, it pretty much became par for the course. However, in the case of Mario Kart 8, that day just refused to come. Until now.
I'll be honest, it's kind of weird to finally be having this conversation, but like death and taxes, this was always going to happen. But now that we're finally here, let's talk about what courses are most likely to return.
Before we start though, we need to figure out exactly how many courses are going to reappear. On average, the number of tracks typically brought back from an immediate predecessor is 4. In Mario Kart DS, we only got 4 GameCube tracks, in Wii we got 4 DS tracks, and in 7 we got 4 Wii tracks. The only outlier here is the base version of Mario Kart 8 for the Wii U, which only gave us 3 3DS tracks. But if we incorporate the initial 2 waves of DLC, both of which came out less than a year after its release, that brings the number of returning 3DS tracks back to 4. All of this is to say that it's almost guaranteed that we'll be getting at least 4 returning tracks from Mario Kart 8. That is assuming, of course, that this new Mario Kart game will have the classic setup of 16 new tracks and 16 returning tracks, which, let's be honest, could very likely be increased given how much content is in the current version of Mario Kart 8.
However, just to play things safe, I'm only going to be limiting us to just 4 tracks. Another important thing I should probably note is that I'm also going to be including the original Wii U DLC packs as a part of my considerations. I don't know, that just seems kind of right, as I feel like Nintendo would also probably consider those as Wii U tracks as well. I know that's going to affect the overall amount of tracks that we have to pick from 16 to 25, but if we're being real, that's probably how Nintendo is going to treat this thing. I think the way that we're going to treat it is that if it was in the base version of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, then it's pretty much fair game.
And finally, because I almost forgot to put this in the script, all of these tracks are in order based on how likely I think we'll get each of them. Obviously, with them all being on the list, I do believe that these are the most likely to make a return, but I do believe that some tracks are more likely to return than others, which is to say that number 1 I feel is pretty much guaranteed, and 4 is the most subject to change. Anyways, onto the list. Ice Ice Outpost.
What?
Alright. Hear me out on this one. I did not choose this course because I like it. In fact, I actually think it's the most boring out of the original new DLC tracks, but that's also what makes it a really good candidate for a returning course, as it's a much simpler track to bring over to a new game. I know a lot of you are probably rushing to the comments already to say something like, oh, why didn't you choose the Zelda or either F-Zero tracks? And truthfully, I'm not totally counting them out either. It's just that when it comes to these tracks in particular, they are dependent on what else is in the game. Out of the 9 new tracks introduced by the DLC, 5 of them were based on other franchises. 1 Zelda, 1 Excitebike, 1 Animal Crossing, and 2 F-Zero. What's important here though is that it wasn't just tracks that were added in from these franchises, as Zelda, Animal Crossing, F-Zero, and later Splatoon all had additional content such as characters and kart parts added alongside the tracks. All of this is to say is that if Link or F-Zero cars make an appearance in the new Mario Kart, then those tracks are very likely to return as well.
What about Mercedes-Benz?
Oh yes, Mario Kart's most important crossover, Mercedes fucking Benz.
But even with the 4 non-crossover tracks, I still think Ice Ice Outpost is the most likely to come back for a few reasons. One is, as discussed before, the overall simplicity of Ice Ice Outpost as a track. Believe it or not every track brought back from a previous game is a banger. Sometimes you need those basic tracks to round out your retro track selection, and when it comes to the DLC, you can't get much simpler than Ice Ice Outpost. Secondly, it seems that Ice Ice Outpost may fit more in line with what this new Mario Kart is going for. Although we only have 10 seconds or so worth of footage, that short amount of time has revealed quite a lot about this game, from the new art style to 24-player races to even potentially showing us some sort of refueling station or Wonder Seed mechanic. And although we've only seen a very brief glimpse of 1 track, I feel somewhat safe in saying that Ice Ice Outpost captures that feel that I'm getting from this new Mario Kart game. Would I prefer another DLC track over Ice Ice Outpost? Of course I would, but if we're placing money on it, I'm going with this one. Ever since the release of Mario Kart Wii, each entry in the series has added some sort of new game-changing features. In Wii, we saw the introduction of bikes, half-pipes, and the trick system. In 7, we were finally able to experience underwater and air traversal, and in 8, we saw the introduction of anti-gravity. Subsequently, each new entry has had at least 1 new retro track that embodies all the new features added in a previous game. In Mario Kart 7, you had the trick-filled Coconut Mall, and in Mario Kart 8, we had Piranha Plant Slide that featured both underwater and flying sections. And if there's one course that truly embodies embodies the anti-gravity features of Mario Kart 8, it has to be Electrodome. If you know anything about Mario Kart 8, then you know that the anti-gravity mechanic is kinda weird, as it really isn't as game-changing as you would think. I mean, yes, it does technically change things up when it comes to course design, but not in a way that's all that noticeable during gameplay. However, Electrodome is one of the rare tracks in Mario Kart 8 that is recognizable for its anti-gravity usage. When I think about Mario Kart 8's anti-gravity, this course immediately comes to mind, and although its usage is fairly simple, it's definitely one of the most memorable tracks to use it. Match that with its very unique theming and you have a very good contender for a returning course, but what also makes Electrodome a very solid pick is the kind of course that it is. Again, we really don't know too much about this new Mario Kart game, however, from the information we do have, it looks like Electrodome may also be a perfect fit, as this course can easily accommodate 24 racers. Additionally, although information is very limited, it doesn't look like there's going to be a huge emphasis on anti-gravity in this game. Granted, it wasn't really in Mario Kart 8 either, but ever since Mario Kart 8 released, it seems that most new tracks since have tried to distance themselves from the anti-gravity mechanic, to the point that Mario Kart Tour, which is considered to be Mario Kart 9 internally, completely scrapped the mechanic altogether, with only minimal implementation in the booster course pass, mainly through the use of half-pipes. If anti-gravity is barely used at all, hell, even completely taken out for new courses, then it would allow Electrodome to stand out a ton more, as it may be one of the only courses in the entire game to utilize the mechanic. Either way, I think Electrodome is a good representation of Mario Kart 8 and its mechanics.
Now that we have all the prerequisites out of the way, let's talk about some actual bangers.
I think we can all agree that one of Mario Kart 8's best courses is Sunshine Airport. It's basically this game's Coconut Mall. It's just that good. And when it comes to the quintessential Mario Kart 8 tracks, this is definitely one of them. What I think makes this course and the #1 spot such good contenders for returning retro tracks is the more universal nature that these courses have. You're always going to have courses that are there to meet certain requirements, and then there's courses like this that are there just because they are really solid tracks. Sure, this track does use anti-gravity in this short section in the air, but if we're being real, it isn't all that necessary, and if this new Mario Kart does plan to axe the mechanic entirely, that doesn't really affect this course, which I think also adds to the likelihood of it getting picked. This is one of those tracks that will go down as one of the best tracks the Mario Kart series has to offer, and when it comes to retro tracks, Nintendo always makes sure to include at least one of the tracks universally considered to be the best of a given title. Think Maple Treeway in Mario Kart 7, or Music Park in Mario Kart 8, and hopefully this ends up being Sunshine Airport in Mario Kart for the Switch too. And if you need a little more convincing, because I keep saying this track can easily accommodate 24-player races. Before we go on to what I believe is the most likely track to return, here are some quick honorable mentions. Now, do keep in mind that 4 tracks is what we're assuming to be the minimum here. It's very likely that we might actually get more tracks than this in the final game, so think of this as a glorified 5 through 8. Water Park, easily the number 8 of this list. There isn't too much to say here other than this is a pretty fun basic course. I felt kinda guilty that I didn't have any courses from the Mushroom Cup, so this is basically the Mario Kart 8 Mushroom Cup rep. It's a pretty neat idea that hasn't been done before. It's unique, fun, and relatively basic, which tends to be the traits that are looked for retro courses. However, there are better courses here that would definitely take the spot over it, but if they weren't a jam, I wouldn't be surprised if this one made a comeback. Now the other 3 are very closely tied for the 5th place spot, those courses being Cloud Top Cruise, Super Bell Speedway, and Shy Guy Falls. Cloud Top Cruise, if you didn't know, is my favorite Mario Kart 8 track. It's a fairly simple track, but a very fun one nonetheless. Ironically enough, I think part of the reason why it's my favorite has to do with the Gusty Garden theme being baked into this track's theme. It's not the sole reason why, but it definitely helps. For some reason, I just tend to really gravitate towards anything airship in the Mario universe. These things fascinate me, and the fact that one plays a significant part in this course is enough to get me on board. If this was the top 4 courses I wanted in the new Mario Kart, then Cloud Top Cruise would be on the top of that list. Super Bell Speedway is probably the second most likely DLC course I see making a return in this new game. It's another really solid track that I think is really underrated. It's a race through an underground subway, which I'm actually surprised hasn't been done before. I know I compared Sunshine Airport to Coconut Mall earlier, but I'm gonna bring up that comparison again, because Super Bell Speedway is another Coconut Mall type track. Truthfully, I would prefer this track to Ice Ice Outpost. I just have that weird feeling that that'll be the rep for the DLC courses, but if there does happen to be an open 5th track spot, I see this one getting it. And of course, Shy Guy Falls. This is a great fucking course. Absolutely one of the standouts of Mario Kart 8. It's a great course that sends you on a really fun expedition across this mountain mine. It's kind of weird to describe, but this course kind of feels like a Disney World ride. I love it, you love it, please bring it back. Again, these 4 tracks are all tracks that I could see coming back if a track or 2 I listed doesn't end up making the cut, or if they do end up bringing back more than 4 courses from 8. I won't lie, some of these courses I would prefer much more than the courses I've actually listed out here, but again, this list is about being realistic rather than the courses I want to see come back. Toad Harbor. There's no other way of putting it. This is just a really, really good course, and out of every other course discussed here, this one I feel is almost 100% guaranteed to return. There really isn't much more to say other than that. Thematically, it's a relatively simple course, yet that also allows it to be as good as it is. This is a fairly complex course with many different ways to race through it, and if I'm being honest, when I first saw the new Mario Kart in action, my mind immediately went to Toad Harbor. Again, it is very early to be making these kinds of assumptions, but I don't know, this one just feels right to me. Out of all the other courses we got in Mario Kart 8, Toad Harbor feels the most compatible with this new game. I don't know why, it just does. Either way, this is another one of those courses that I think will universally be accepted as one of the best the series has to offer. Although it may not have all the flair and prestige as something like Sunshine Airport due to its thematic simplicity, Toad Harbor certainly makes up for it with its actual design. To me, this has always been a guaranteed returning course from 8. If it doesn't end up coming back, I would genuinely be surprised, as this course has always found its way into the discussions of returning courses.
But those are just my personal picks for what I think are the most likely tracks to make a return in the new Mario Kart game. Although the order may be subject to change, I would be pretty surprised if any of the tracks outside of the 8 I have chosen make a return here. But as far as right now, I think these are the most likely tracks to make a return.
If you have any other tracks you think would be more likely to return, let me know in the comments below. But as for me, thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.
I feel like a tier list would have been better.
Yeah, I probably would have. Oh fuck!